Motto podcast, and today we're very lucky to have Ian Kennedy as our guest. Welcome, Ian.
Hello, Mariheca. Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
It's great in your golf course. So I want to talk to you about who you are and why we've got you in the conversation today, and why it is such an exciting time for us. So please, first of all, who are you and where do you come from and what have you done? Tell us a little bit about your career.
I suppose it is who you ask, right? I'm going to get a different answer maybe for that. But so interestingly, my background is in professional sports, and had great aspirations in terms of my golf career, which I played professionally from 1998 to 2005, and got severely injured. To where I couldn't compete again. So I had to get a real job and went into the world of corporate, which was quite a shock to the system, as you can imagine, when every day I'd spent on a golf course, or if I wasn't on a golf course, I was thinking about golf, I was on a driving range, or I was traveling around the world, playing golf tournaments. So it was quite a shock, and now all of a sudden I had to learn how to use a computer. I had to learn to listen or to be told what to do. So it was quite a change. However, I adapted quite nicely, in as much as was very, very keen to learn. I've always been very, very driven to succeed, and that's a mindset you got to have if you want to be a professional sportsman. So learned the ropes fairly quickly, with a lot of bumps and bruises on the way, and worked my way up into senior management positions in corporate and then in some SMEs, and learned a lot about life, about business, about people, about cultures, and specifically leadership. And then one day, had a little epiphany, and they say that, some of the greatest ideas have come through dreams. And I found out the other day that the periodic table is one that came to a scientist in a dream, which, amazing, right? And I'm not saying that mine is a life-breaking, groundbreaking dream by any matter, but it was like a mid-afternoon nap, and I realized I needed a complete shift in direction or where I was. And decided that I wanted to go into coaching and behavior, because it's what I love, and I love people, and I love working with people and seeing people succeed and blossom. So when I studied at university, I got my degree, which I got in the US while on a golf scholarship. I've got my background in psychology, and had a great affinity for psychology because of a sports psychologist that had meant something to me in my younger years. And then at the time as well, I had been working when I was a professional with one of South Africa's gurus in coaching, Sunny Stout-Rostrom. And Sunny was one of my mentors. She still is. Just love Sunny to bits. And with everything that was coming together, said, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. And the rest is history. Went and got my diploma through the coaching center, and started falling in love with the process of working with people, and that's an integral approach. So you're looking at all the different lenses of a person, and their surroundings and the environments and what happens to them. And always had a slant towards sport because of my background in sport, but also obviously on the business side. And so, if you, for lack of, phrases and titles, but I call myself a performance and business coach. And facilitator. So I work with a lot of teams, a lot of teams effectiveness. I've had a privilege to work with some phenomenal businesses and phenomenal sports teams, which we all know quite well. So that's been very, very exciting. And this is what gets me to where I am today, and continually learning through people like yourself, right? So it's wonderful. It's a wonderful line of work, and every day I just love what I do. It's very cool.
So, I want to ask you, if you look at how you coach all these sports people and how you look at what you've got to help them with, if you had, and you've had a coach, but if you had been able to get the advice at a really young age in your career, do you think it would have made a difference to the way you performed and how you showed up?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I do think so. So, yes, I did have coaches and I had a sports psychologist as well. I think what the advice, if I had got it then as well, is don't sweat the small stuff. I found that sometimes when I was playing and it became a profession, I started really focusing on small things, which shouldn't necessarily was taking away from my focus of what I was wanting to achieve. That being said, I was incredibly disciplined and hardworking in my daily practices of trying to do what I wanted to do as a professional golfer. But yeah, I think don't sweat the small stuff, and kind of understanding how that can block you. You know, when you're maybe focusing on the the noise as opposed to what's real, and getting your validation from oneself as opposed to from your outside world, which I think as a professional sportsman, that is very, very easy to do, because you are, you know, you get a lot of validation from what's going on around you. So yeah.
Absolutely. And if you look at when you were playing and you were really putting yourself out there, etc., and then you had your injury, how did you bounce back? How did you get through that?
Sure. Well, sure. Never been asked that. So I think because it was career ending, I suppose, you know, that was tough to swallow. And I think, yeah, there was a lot of soul searching, because it had kind of been taken away from me. And now I'm completely fine with it. I'm really, really, really fine. I'm actually more than fine. I'm very happy and content. But at the time, I think I just had a really good support base. My wife was fantastic. My parents fantastic to just, you know, support me. And the work that I had was still in golf. Was sort of working for the Arabella Group. So that is the first corporate I worked with, and they're part of Starwood, and my role was a golf role. So at least my transition was into that, as opposed to going straight into, you know, a management position of a different kind of business. So that helped. But you know, it's and Mariheca, you see it a lot, I'm sure, with people that have just retired, and all of a sudden their sense of self-worth kind of gets taken away from them, because now the phone's not ringing anymore. People don't need them. They were the CEO of whatever big company, and the phone stops ringing, and you know, like, who am I now? And I really like to work with people to understand that they're more than just what their role is in terms of how they make money. You know, they're a mother, they're a father, they're a wife, they're a husband, all those things. And I think that, you know, I really looked at, I wasn't just a golfer. And it's one of the things which sometimes is difficult for me to shake off, for other people's perception of what I do now is, oh, he's Ian the golfer. Well, no, a golfer is a small part of me, but there's so much more. And I think with, you know, working with others, for them to understand that they are so much more than just a role they play in an organization. And so they can show up more authentically, and with all their great qualities, they can hold on to that. And if they get a bad report or they get a great report, it doesn't actually make a difference to how they value themselves. And I go back to that external validation if you start looking from inside. And I think that's what I learned a lot through that process. And yeah, I hadn't really thought about it. So, but thank you.
I find it fascinating, because when you spoke of it, it reminded me that we are going through this hectic global trauma, and what you went through is so traumatic because it happens to you. It's not like you chose to end a career, or you chose to lose a job, or you chose, and I'm talking now, you know, what's happening now with COVID. Yes. And how people are really, you know, they're losing their sense of identity, and they're struggling with that. So I think your advice is so valuable. Thank you. It's really cool. I want to ask you, so you and I have been working to try to figure out how can we add value to the sports space, and with your understanding of how those things work and my limited understanding of how things work.
You know more than you give yourself credit for. That's for sure. Don't worry.
I embarrass my children on a regular basis when they talk about sports people. So, and I'm really bad. So, and what I've been finding so interesting is, so we've been working on this search tool, which is a sports tool that measures perceptions of teams and where they are at the moment, and we also now expanding it to individuals. So you have lived and you've worked with sports people, and you are one. How do you think this is going to add value going forward?
Yeah, I love it, and thanks for working together on this, because it is really, really exciting. And we look at what holds people back. What is it that's holding a team back from maybe true performance, or at the same time, what is making them excel? And that's what I love about Surge. It's not just about how bad we are. It's also about how good we are as well. So it's not about that. It's about finding the performance indicators of why we are successful or not. And that's what I love about it. And it can be done at any time, because it's a screenshot in time of a sports team's culture. It's of their effectiveness, and how they're working and operating together, or how they're not, and looking for those key performance areas where one can improve. And then also those key performance areas we must hold on to. Wow, we are excelling in terms of our authenticity and communication. Wow, we must never let go of that. What must we do to make sure we don't? Why is it as good as it is? And okay, now we're knowing that. What must we know that could derail us? What could be the hurdle that could come in its way? What must we be aware of? What have we created? So it's something to know. And we looked at how this could be worked now during COVID, when these teams, look at the Super Rugby, they've been put on pause. If you look at how the Sharks were doing, they were doing so well. What is it? Why were they performing as well? Then we look at the other teams, maybe like the Lions, who have really got us a bad start, to the Bulls. What could they learn in this time and actually use it as a measure? But that's Super Rugby is just one example. This can be used across the world with not only professional sports teams, but also with amateur sports teams. We can think of high school rugby teams and hockey teams and netball teams. This is so useful. And we look at this is finding the other 80%, because the old principle in sports, it's 80%, 20% is natural talent, 80% is up in the head. And I look at back when I was playing, and I look, what are the difference between the uber successful and the ones that weren't? And invariably, the ones that weren't successful were the ones that were the most talented. It was the ones that worked that much harder, that were mentally tougher than the uber talented ones. And you see that across all sports. And that's what I love about, the team tool. And from an individual point of view as well, understanding is what is driving me right now. Where can I improve? What are those performance indicators for me? And you and I talked about this, just last week, saying, if I had this for myself back then, what I would have learned from that, and I could have worked, being as driven as I was and hardworking as I was, I know I would have made that effort to put in, so I could get that extra 80%. And that's what I think Surge is just absolutely incredible at for those performance indicators in sport.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate how you explained this. So after our conversation the other day, I had a conversation with one of my children, and I realized that they also need to understand this whole 2080 thing, because they would say things like, "Yeah, but I can't do this. I'm not talented enough. So and so can do this, and so and so." And I quoted you. It's all about what's going on here and your mindset. Because this is if we can help our children to understand it, because it's also not just in sport, but it's also in other areas of your life. So if you can learn this skill it now through team sport or through individual sport. It's a skill set that you've got for the rest of your life, and knowing how to deal with it. There was one particular construct to me that actually blew my mind when we spoke about this. And that construct, so when we talk about if you want to achieve your biggest goal, your biggest vision in life or whatever, and the bottom model works around these different constructs that talk about what is it that you're going to need to achieve these things. And there's one particular construct that we would normally, in an organization, a business, we would talk about problem solving, we would talk about putting systems and processes and things like that in place. And when we were working on this thing, I said to you, I don't know how to apply this model now to the sports space, especially for an individual. And it was amazing how quickly you could answer that to me. And you said to me, it is about the practice. And I want you to just talk about that for a bit. Why is it that the practice is such a critical element to make things flow?
Yeah, I mean, so when you're practicing, you're learning. You know, you've got a benchmark which you are learning against or learning with, whether it's, you know, if I take athletics, there's a time that's involved. So you know how you do all the time. In golf, there's a score. In rugby, there's a score. You know, if you're a kicker in a rugby team, the ball's either going through the poles or it isn't for the points. So there's all those kind of thing. So when you're practicing, you get this repetition and seeing, you get continual feedback of how you're doing. So, you know, in business, your feedback happens maybe 4 times a year, you know, at the end of each quarter. So if you're lucky, some organizations don't do it as regularly. So, you know, you're not getting the feedback as much. So in individual sports and sports as a team, there's continually feedback every single day. And you know, and I go back to the guys and girls that are uber talented and that extra 80% with the brain, the ones that are really practicing that much harder are getting mentally tougher, because you learn to, and I hate to use the word fail, but for lack of a better word right now, that failure is how you can achieve better things, because it's the feedback that you take from that. I'll give you an example. So in golf, I was struggling with my bunker shots, which is for you, Mariheca, out of the sand. So I set myself a goal every day when I was living in the US, when this is at the time when I was struggling, is I want to become the best bunker player possible. And every day I would start off with a bunker practice. And my goal was I wasn't allowed to leave the bunker until 1 ball went in the hole. Just 1. So it wasn't like 10 balls, just 1. And first time it took me forever. And then I got so good at bunker shots that sometimes I'd literally hold my first one and I'd walk out the bunker. So it was kind of like there was a reward to that. So it's those mini goal settings for the bigger goal that you're trying to achieve. And that's what Surge will pick up, or what does pick up. It picks up is how are you utilizing your time? Where are you not? What can you do differently and improve upon with objectively looking at it? Not, you know, you're in trouble, you haven't been doing it. It's not about that. It's about, okay, where do my opportunities lie? Knowing how I operate. And now that I know how I operate, what can I do about it? The fact that I can have a lazy streak, okay, that's fine. Lots of people do. But what do you want to do with that knowledge of now knowing you have a lazy streak? You know, and it's the same thing. You know, often what we see is that athletes are living their goals because they're someone else's. Someone else really wants them to achieve, and they don't necessarily want it. And for them to get that understanding of, okay, I get it, you know, it's my dad, it's my mom, it's somebody, or I've got a brother who's so much better than me, and I want to do it because I want to be better than him, or a sister, what it might be, is you're living it for maybe the wrong reasons. And when you understand that, okay, now that we know that, it's okay, let's accept it, let's own it. What can we do next? And what can be my own goals? So I truly want to do whatever it is I'm wanting to achieve, not for someone else, because that's when, performance issues and personality, troubles can happen because of it, So, yeah.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you for explaining that, because you made it very, very practical. And I think that's what we're also trying to achieve, to make this whole process very practical. To say, listen, guys, if you do this, this is what you're going to get out of it. And this is how it can change your career, your life, your team, your etc. So I'm super excited about that. Thank you for spending time with us and thinking about these things. It's so nice. And
thank you, Mariheca.
I really your bunker explanation story, and luckily you've got a visual there at the background so I can understand what you're talking about. Oh, my word. Thanks, Ian. That is absolutely perfect. It was lovely having you. Yeah.
Thanks for having me, Mariheca. Yeah, it was good fun. Thank you.
So I don't even know how to pause or stop this thing. I'll have to send the entire thing again. Let's just see if we can find stop recording. There we go.
Yeah, there we go.
Stop.